My love of the TV series Smallville is well documented, and there's one Smallville podcast that's always at the top of my queue. Always Hold On to Smallville, hosted by our pal, Zach Moore. Zach and his guests bring tremendous insight, passion, and humor to each and every episode, and the podcast continues with more great Smallville and Superman talk now that their series rewatch has concluded. Listen wherever you get podcasts, and keep an eye out for the other shows under the Always Hold On To banner. We all love the big-budget superhero films, but the world of independent cinema remains a place of creative freedom and entrepreneurial spirit. Whether you're an independent filmmaker yourself or you just love movies, don't miss these New Jersey festivals. Brightside Tavern in Jersey City, Hang On to Your Shorts in Asbury Park, and Round Reel in Bloomfield. And now, they're joined by the Shorts and Stout Film Festival in Long Beach, New York. Event details, as well as submission information for filmmakers, can be found at filmfreeway.com. One of the most pivotal entries in the supercanon and my early fandom is the 90s television series Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, starring Terry Hatcher and Dean Cain, which brought the post-crisis comics to screen, elevated Lois, and pushed the characters forward into new romantic territory. Across 4 seasons, 2 Jimmy Olsens, and 1 frog-eating clone, the series charted Lois and Clark's journey from first meeting through marriage and the verge of parenthood. Now, it's time to re-examine the series, its well-developed supporting cast, one of the best Lex Luthors of all time, and of course, the romance. Welcome to Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. These are the Lois and Clark TV mixtapes. Joining me to draft our Superman revenge squads from the villains of the show is a pair of guests. First up, we have one of the hosts of the All-Star Superfan podcast, returning guest Rob O'Connor. Welcome back.
Try to penetrate my wall of sound. For some, that will be a deep cut. For others, one of the greatest rock and roll hits of the 90s.
Rob, this is why I love podcasting with you, because I knew you were going to hit me with some villain quote from the show. I didn't know if it was going to be a duh from Tempus or something more obscure, and you delivered. So right on, man. I want to give a shout out to your partner in crime, your co-host, Alan. Originally, he was going to join us as well. Scheduling didn't work out, but I know he's a big Lois and Clark fan as well, and he's with us in spirit. So shout out to Alan, yeah?
Absolutely, yeah. He's a massive Lois and Clark fan, and it broke his heart not to be here, but he sends his love.
Right on. And we have a new voice to the show, one of the hosts of Always Hold On to Star Wars, first-time guest, Chris Fuchs. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. Can I steal duh? I'll throw that out there.
Absolutely. That's a classic, man. You can never go wrong with that.
Doesn't really apply to me being here, but I'll take it.
No, all good. So I was trying to figure out a fun and efficient way to talk about the non-Lex villains of Lois and Clark, because of course we did a whole spotlight episode on John Shea's Lex, and I was figuring out, okay, how can we tackle the rest of these villains? And I landed on this idea of a draft. Now, I'm not a sport guy, even saying that doesn't sound right. I'm not into sports other than being really into basketball during elementary school. This is like 90s era Knicks, Larry Johnson's 4-point play. Chris, I know you're a New York guy. I know you know what I'm talking about. But other than that, no, I'm not in the sports world. But I will fully admit I stole this idea from the Boy Meets World rewatch podcast, Pod Meets World, because what they'll do at the end of each season is they will draft their favorite episodes of the season. And then they'll post the lineups on social media and people will vote for who had the best. And I was like, oh, I think that would be a really fun way for us to approach the villains of Lois and Clark. So we are going to have this draft. We're going to play this game. This is a first for the podcast. After you listen, folks, make sure you head on over to social media and I'll put up a graphic with the Superman revenge squads that each of us come up with and people can vote as to what's the best. And on that note, and we were talking about this off mic, I'm leaving it up to each of us as far as what best means. It might be that we're thinking about what would be most effective against Superman. We might be thinking about what the most entertaining combination would be if this were an episode of the show. Someone might just go rogue and aim for humor and absurdity. Any of these approaches are valid, and I'm really curious to see what everybody comes up with. We're going to aim for 4 rounds. Depending on how long it takes us to get through, we might go further than that, but we'll aim for 4. And with the exception of Lex, all the other villains of the show are on the table. I debated eliminating Lex's underlings and illegitimate sons, but they're in play. The only one we won't use is Lex himself. And once a villain has been drafted, of course, they won't be available at that point. And we'll recap at various points along the way to kind of, again, recap where everybody is at that point in time. So I think this should be a lot of fun. Before we get started, I wanted to toss the ball to you guys to hear about your experience generally with Lois and Clark and the space it occupies in your Superman fandom. Rob, you want to take it first?
Yeah, so I've been pretty vocal over the years. Lois and Clark is what introduced me to Superman, and in many ways, it is my favorite version of Superman. I've no shame in saying that. I think so many of the elements in Lois and Clark are definitive to me. Perry White it's the best version of Perry White in any medium. Jimmy Olsen, I think, is great. Lois herself, Terry Hatcher is my favorite Lois Lane. And even just the world building in it, like it just feels, even though it's the, Warner Brothers backlot and all, it feels like a real living, breathing metropolis to me every time I watch it. I think it's the most underrated superhero show ever, and it's the most underrated version of Superman. We all know there's a pretty big contributing reason to that we don't need to get into. But no, I absolutely love Lois and Clark, and I'm always here to fly the flag for it anytime I can.
Right on. And yeah, I know you and Alan, but you've been very vocal about your love of the show. And when I have heard you talk about it or seen you post about it, it's not that I roll my eyes at it, but I think there's a sense sometimes because I haven't been there with you to that degree. But at the same time, I say to myself, well, Rob probably feels the same when I go on and on about Smallville or the Snyder stuff. So like we all have those things that we love. But I am happy to say, Rob, especially after this whole rewatch journey, my love, my appreciation for this show and what it did for my fandom and the Superman canon at a very particular point in time has never been higher. So I really Amazing. Co-sign on what you're saying, and I'm excited to get your perspective. Chris, what about you?
Yeah, for me, it's a lot of the same. This was my real first foray into the character, the growing up with it. I watched this weekly with my dad. It was appointment television for us, something I got to do with him, and really enjoyed sharing that. And Superman has always been my favorite character out of anything. So eating up all of the different medias that we have, but going back to Lois and Clark, because it was that first real developmental wise for me, it's always been top in my heart as well.
Right on. Now, on the villain front, Rob, you have coined a term to refer to the villains of the show generally. And look, we have different categories of villains. There are some who are actual adaptations of comic book characters. We have 2 versions of Toyman. We have Prankster. We have Metallo. We have Mxyzptlk. We have Lord Nor, who's essentially Zod. But then we have a ton of original villains to the show, and some are absolute standouts. Others, maybe not so much. But do you want to share what your term is? Because I definitely had that in my head as I was rewatching and as I was thinking about this episode, and I'm like, yep, that's pretty accurate.
I'm so happy to hear that. That's amazing. So I was watching Lois and Clark a couple of years ago with my fiance, and I think we'd had a couple of glasses of wine, so we were feeling a little bit giddy. And I sort of turned to her and I said, the villains of the week in Lois and Clark, they're not really super villains. They're kind of just goofy guys. And it kind of stuck. And I think I refer to the goofy guys as being the original villains of the week, because the vast majority of the show is made up of these original villains of the week who turn up once and then you never hear from them again. They're not based on characters from the comics, and they're kind of just, human con men, or a lot of them are billionaires or CEOs. They're kind of like Lex Luthor also rans. And there's usually like someone that they have to bicker with for the episode, and that's kind of their shtick. So yeah, the goofy guys are what I refer to for the villains of Lois and Clark.
Chris, do you feel like that's a fair term for most of these folks?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's, you see some of the takes that they do on even the comic book versions of it, and I'm kind of impressed that they went as far as they did like bringing names and comic book lore into a show that was kind of marketed as like it was more to people as a love story, and to follow the characters in that regard. And that was like the network's push for it, and that was the initial driving factor for everything, so that we got to see all of this comic book lore along with it. It was nice to see, even if there were some kind of zany takes on the actual comic book versions of the villains. It was always entertaining.
Yeah, right on. Now, Rob, I wanted to pick your brain about this because I know, like myself, you've spent a lot of time with the George Reeves Adventures of Superman series, and I can't help but think that my time with that show recently, no less, gave me even more appreciation for the goofy guys here, because talking about the villains, and as you were describing the categories of villains and the businessmen, and we have a bunch of doctors and scientists, and but fairly generic. They're not worlds apart from the Adventures of Superman villains, but I feel like here there is at least more meat on the bone, more dynamics to play, and so I feel like I enjoyed them more. Not to put Adventures of Superman down, but just by comparison, I feel like I got a little bit more out of them than I might have had I rewatched this totally in a vacuum. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Like, this is Lois and Clark, the new Adventures of Superman. Like, this is very much an extension and an evolution of the George Reeves show. And, a lot of the times when people sort of dismiss this show, they'll say, oh, they didn't take enough from the comics, or they didn't take enough inspiration from the comics or whatever. And yet I always make the point that Superman is a multimedia character, like, and always has been. And a lot of the iconic versions we think of when we think of Superman, they evolved from various different things, not just the comics. Like, Jimmy Olsen comes from the radio show, Kryptonite comes from the radio show, Perry White was all this sort of stuff. So I definitely think the villains in this, when they were devising the show, they were going, okay, so how do you do Superman on TV? Oh, well, let's look at this TV show and let's look at these movies, as opposed to just, well, here are the comics, which you might do with, I don't know, Spider-Man. So I definitely think, and part of my frustration when I watch George Reeves is they're always gangsters. They're just always gangsters. Whereas in Lois and Clark, there's a bit more variety. You have billionaires, you have mad scientists. There can be a flavor of science fiction in the Lois and Clark villain plots, whereas in the George Reeves plots, there almost never is. Which I quite like. So I absolutely think it's a very solid extension and expansion and evolution from the George Reeves show, for sure.
Yeah, well said. No, I feel like, they are in conversation with each other, and it's interesting to consider them in that way. And one of the other big picture things is, and we talked about this, especially when we went through the relationship arc of the show, but just the different eras of Lois and Clark, the New Adventures of Superman. And as the show progresses, we have these different iterations of the relationship, but also of the villains. I mean, it's kind of wild. You think about somebody like Preston Carpenter in season 1, the head of the Daily Star, who's manufacturing these disasters to get the story, to then like evil optometrists in season 2. Then we're at the beginning of season 3. We've got Spencer who's trying to put his head on Superman's body. It's like there's quite a range as the show progresses. One of the things I talked about with Zach Moore in our John Shea Lex Spotlight, and I don't want to rehash it too much, but it is relevant, is that, I mean, I think it goes without saying, we lost something when Lex departed the show. And one of the ways in which I feel like that manifests in season 1, there were a bunch of instances where we had kind of our villain of the week, but Lex was behind them. Lex was manipulating things. He was pulling the strings. And I felt like that gave some weight to some otherwise fairly generic villains of the week. But as we get deeper into the series and without Lex behind it, I feel like it does lose a little bit. So how do you feel about something like that, Chris?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the strongest points of villains are when you have that late tie-in to Lex that you maybe didn't even know for half of the episode, and then once he's gone, it's like trying to recreate the magic that you had with him. Sometimes it struck, sometimes it didn't.
I guess the last thing that I wanted to pick your brains about, we're here to talk about the villains who were on the show. But what about villains who weren't? I mean, like we're saying, the show did pull from the comics to some extent, but primarily we had these original villains of the week. And I'm curious, whether it's from the comics or other Superman adaptations, are there villains you are surprised and or disappointed that they didn't adapt? Rob, you were nodding as I was starting to say it. What you got?
Oh man, there's so many. I mean, I think Parasite is a pretty easy one they could have done, and I've definitely read a fanfic where it was a Parasite episode. I maintain that the villain in the very final episode, Fathead Mensa, it hurts my feelings just saying the name because it's such a bad name and he's such a bad villain. I really strongly think that at some point they were thinking, what's a good name for a guy with a big brain? And I bet DC Comics stepped in and said, no, guys, you're not calling them that. Because if you watch those later seasons, that there are a bunch of villains. Deathstroke, for example, where it's like they just took the name and just slapped it on someone who had nothing to do with that character. Vixen, I think, as well, is in season 4, has absolutely nothing to do with the comic book version. So I suspect that guy was probably going to be Brainiac. And then, they never would have done it. But like, I do find myself wondering, like, what is the Lois and Clark version of Darkseid? Like, what would that even be? Because we got the Smallville version of Darkseid, and that was a mess. So why not think about that too?
That would have been wild. Before I give my picks, Chris, any that immediately come to your mind?
Well, Parasite would have definitely jumped to mind. I think that's something that could have easily adapted to this version of the show and version of the character. I'm gonna go because I don't think they would have gone too far out there, but like a Mongol type character, like someone who, or even maybe like a Lobo type, like another intergalactic traveler or something that just has a beef and he gets to just square off against Superman.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe something like that.
Yeah, it's like even if they didn't do the full on look, but something in that mode. I'm gonna be very predictable here. The audience probably knows where I'm going with this. Conduit, come on. Even if they didn't do the full look, but this was a villain of the era right while the show was airing. And his whole backstory and motivation are like tailor-made for this version of Clark and Superman. His whole thing, they grew up together.
Absolutely.
He was always jealous of Clark's accomplishments. So he has this grudge against Clark to begin with. Then he finds out that Clark is Superman. That just adds fuel to his fire. And he's got these kryptonite-based powers. Even if they didn't do the full costume, some sort of kryptonite-based powers or weapons with that motivation. And you could see an episode or an arc where Kenny from Smallville comes to visit Clark in the big city, and it seems like they're friends, but then you get the sense that, no, there's more going on. Maybe he makes a move on Lois or something like that. Then he finds out the secret. I mean, I just feel like that was obvious for this version, especially.
And that gives you a great opportunity to weave in Jonathan and Martha as well, because maybe there was beef with Kenny's father or what have you, because he had an abusive father, didn't he? I think, Kenny Braverman.
Yeah, I forget if he was outright physically abusive, but he was definitely very hard on him and was always putting him down. So yeah, I know you have that angle to play as well. Ah, man.
This Clark is an established public figure. He's winning Kurth Awards, and this would be a perfect opportunity to do a character like that.
Yeah, he's winning these awards. They establish he played football in college. I mean, presumably he had or he could have had a stellar high school career as well. Oh man. I'll always be on my Conduit kick here. So, all right, you guys ready to get into our draft?
Let's do it.
All right, I used a random draft order generator, and this is the order that we landed on. Rob, you are going to kick us off. I'm going to be in the middle, and then Chris. But we're following a snake-style draft, so it's going to snake around. So basically, whoever ends one round is going to start the next round. So I have the worst spot because I don't have any back-to-back picks, but you guys will have the opportunity to have 2 picks. I think we can get into this. I have my whole chart here that I wrote out. I'm going to record our selections as we move along here. Any joke picks that we want to get out of our systems before we start?
Well, I mean, they're kind of all joke picks, to be honest. So, they are goofy guys.
Yeah, I feel like there's a very obvious real world one that I'll sidestep, but I don't know. Terry Hatcher's haircut at the beginning of season 3.
Yeah.
That might be one.
The real villain of the story.
Yeah, I haven't talked about this yet. Even in our whole romance episode, I didn't talk about it, and I don't want to be superficial, comment on a woman's appearance, but she's so gorgeous. And that haircut, man, it was a killer. Because also, I'll be very superficial here, but the beginning of season 3, the hair was as long as it would get on the show.
Ever been.
And
yeah.
I quite enjoyed that look, and then to lose that was a bit of a disappointment. So if we were doing a kind of joke bonus round, I would say Terry Hatcher's haircut.
To your defense, the early seasons, her hair it was almost like a style. Like it was the Lois bob. It's almost like the Rachel of Friends. And it was iconic. So when you lose that,
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that I wonder if you guys bumped into this at all as you were strategizing who you were going to pick, because it's a Superman show. At the end of the day, Superman always wins. So it's like, as I'm thinking about these villains, it's hard sometimes not to think about their flaws, their weaknesses, because they're all defeated. So it's like, but I try not to let that disqualify too many, because we'd go down that road too much. But I definitely was running into that as I was making my list.
Well, in true Superman fashion, there's always an opportunity for them to come back.
Right.
And get revenge.
That's right. Even if they jump off a building and just splatter all over the pavement, that still doesn't count them out, as we learned with Lex.
Top of the world. It's interesting even talking about the years of the show, though, because I think when the show started, the villains are definitely, they're geared towards Superman specifically, if that makes sense. Whereas as the series goes on, they're more kind of Lois and Clark centric, so that they need to be a challenge for both Lois and Clark. And even when Lex comes back later on in the series, he's driven by his love for Lois as much as his hatred for Superman. So it's really moving in a different direction villain wise, I think, than the early seasons, where it was like the villains either want to destroy Superman or get a lot of money and Superman has to stop them, whereas Lois becomes much more kind of like intrinsically involved in the villain's motivation as the series goes on. So it was interesting even like mapping these out. It's like, is this a Superman villain or a Lois and Clark villain, if that makes sense?
Let's say quite a few that are even just Lois and Superman's just involved tangentially.
Yeah, no, that's a great observation. I know I was calling this Superman Revenge Squad, but maybe in fairness, Superman and Lois Revenge Squad. No, that's a great point. All right, round one. Rob, kick us off here. Who is your first draft pick?
Okay, so he's not actually first on my list, but I have to mention him first because I just love him. It's one of the most underrated episodes of the show, I think. Lenny the Soundman Stoke from season 2, Wall of Sound. He's rock and roll, kind of cult rock and roll frontman guy. He has this song called Wall of Sound that he sings at the top of the episode, and it's so catchy. And he's kind of got these weird sound wave abilities where he can create force fields from sound. And then there's this great showdown at the end where the way Superman stops him is he has to fly around the world really quickly. I always thought it was really, really cool as a kid. And you know, he's a good sort of a scientific mastermind-ish type character. It's good to have that. And he's just, he's got a bitchin' leather jacket and he wears a motorcycle helmet to disguise himself from the police. So he is number one for me. Oh, and also the actor Michael Desbarres, he was also in an episode of Superboy. He was in a 2-parter of Superboy in season 4, which is pretty fun. And I believe he was the arch villain on MacGyver. He played Murdoch on MacGyver. So any MacGyver fans would know him from that as well. So Lenny the Soundman Stoke.
I'm floored. I was not expecting that. That just stopped me dead in my tracks. Chris, any reaction?
I mean, I am somewhat of a sports guy, and that's a obscure number 1 overall pick.
There we go.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him. I feel, this is why I love doing this. This is fun because it's like I was strategizing, right? And I'm like, okay, I mean, I was 99% sure I knew who the first pick was going to be. And then that informed who I was going to pick at number 2. And now this throws everything out of whack. Oh, damn it, Rob.
Last thing I want to say, you were asking about characters they should have brought into the series, and I didn't want to say this at the time because it would spoil that I was going to mention Lenny the Soundman Stoke, but I've always thought that Lenny the Soundman Stoke would be a good avenue to bring Livewire into the show because, you know, maybe she's a groupie at one of his gigs, or maybe she gives one of his gigs a really bad review on her Shock Jock radio show, and that's how we weave her into the world of Lois and Clark. So, you know, that they could be kind of like jilted ex-lovers or something like that. I thought that'd be a cool way to bring Livewire in.
In talking about sound, I thought you were going to say Silver Banshee because I know you're a big Silver Banshee fan.
Yeah, her too. Yeah, absolutely.
Although after seeing Smallville's take, I don't know. But all right. Well, that really threw me off. Oh, man. As tempted as I am to pivot to what I thought was going to be the first pick, I think I'm going to stick with what I was thinking. This might be a fatal mistake when we get to the voting, but I'm going to stick with my number 1, Lord Noor. from the New Krypton arc. Essentially, the show's stand-in for Zod. On record, I love the New Krypton arc that ends season 3 and kicks off season 4. I've said it so many times, but I just feel like all the best parts of the show come together. The romance, the longing, the action, the scale of it. And as far as Lord Noor himself, yes, he's hungry for power, but he proves himself adept at the political maneuvering, ultimately positioning things such that Kal-El is going to be executed, his molecules scattered across the cosmos. And it also gets very personal quickly because he occupies Smallville. And so he's got Jonathan and Martha in captivity. And not only do we have the back and forth, kind of the verbal sparring, but we get an actual duel between the two of them with those batons. And I gotta say, and I know I've said this before too, but that moment in the battle when Superman kicks up that baton and the music just hits, it's one of my favorite moments, especially from an action standpoint. So I have to go Lord Noor. Also, not to reveal too much of my strategy, but I wanted to make sure I had power here. I wanted to make sure I had a heavy hitter, and Lord Noor kind of fills that role. Any thoughts or observations you guys have on this character while we're talking about him?
I'm a huge fan of that arc as well, Anthony. You did a great episode on it, I remember, with Matt a couple of years ago on that arc. I really enjoyed that one. It's a fantastic arc, and I wish there had been more examples of that in the series where it's like all the elements are hitting just right. Like they got the Superman of it really, really well in that arc as well, I think. And I thought the American Gladiators batons, that's a nice compromise because we're not going to have a big crazy Superman 2 battle in this show. We don't have the budget for it. So they came up with this reason, okay, Kryptonians use these batons in battle. Let's just use them, and it works, and it's cool. And I've made the point a few times. I think this is a coincidence. This isn't something that was designed by the showrunners, but like that episode where Superman lands in front of Lord Noor, and Lord Noor says, "Well, who are you fighting for?" And he says, "I'm fighting for my people." You can view that as like the culmination of Clark's arc over the whole show. You know, he starts out, he's unsure where he comes from, he's unsure of his place in the world, and then gradually as the show builds, he gets more of a sense of what Superman means to him, what his relationship with Earth is, his relationship with Lois, his relationship with his parents, and then all these things are kind of converging into one showdown in that moment. And I think the actor who plays Superman, whose name I try not to say anymore, I think he's really, really powerful and really, really charismatic in that moment, and you really fully believe him as Superman, and not just Clark Kent playing Superman, which I think he's doing throughout a lot of the show. He really embodies the comic book character there, and yeah, I love that arc. And Lord Noor, he's just General Zod, but they do a pretty good job of it, I think, you know. And that actor is a lot of fun, and I always you spot him and stuff. He was a barista in an episode of Melrose Place one time, and I was like, hey, it's Lord Noor. He's a good guy, that guy.
Yeah, I thought he walked an effective line between being sinister and threatening, but also keeping that campy humor and flair as well. And the moment at the end of the season 4 premiere where Clark reveals himself in Smallville and asks what Lord Noor wants, and he's like, "I want your throne." I'm not going to do the accent. He goes, "I want your throne, and I want your world, and I want you gone forever." It's like it's such a great moment to end on, and it's also an interesting contrast between Noor and the other Kryptonians. Like this isn't Kandor type situation, but similar type of setup. But like they have their own world, but it's just like barren wasteland. And the majority of them are content to return to it. And Noor is like, "Hey, we got this place here. Like this is new Krypton." So in terms of motivation, all of it, it tracked. Oh, I did have one question related to that final battle here, because this is as good a time as any to address it. When Ching is training Clark, right, on the ways of this style of combat, there's this whole idea about tapping into the Kryptonian side and the killer instinct. Everything fades away and you just go for the kill, and you get this light display and this extra burst of power. And during the training, right, it doesn't seem like this is something Clark will delve into, but in the battle, he does access that. What do we make of Clark in that moment in the battle? What was he truly prepared to kill? Could he have still held it back in some way? Like what do we think about that?
I think they didn't fully really think that through, because it's never really referred to again. But I feel like he probably would. I feel like the inference is that he probably would kill. I think Clark, the man, and the human, And they do explore, actually, you've got me thinking about it now. They do explore Superman's kind of reverence for life, and there's a bit earlier in the episode where the Kryptonians are showing him this battle plan, and they're like, oh, well, these are acceptable losses or something like that. And he's like, no, they're not acceptable losses. These are people. And it's a really, really good scene. So maybe this is kind of expanding on that, where they're kind of going, well, at times there must be acceptable losses. I don't know. I feel like the show is presenting us with a Superman who probably would kill in that moment. Yeah, as much as it pains me to say, I think that's what they're driving at there.
I think my take on it more is that showing that he's capable of it. It's inside him. He's able to do it, but he's stronger than that, and won't ultimately do it.
Yeah, well, because in fairness, like even as we're talking about this, after he blasts Nor, if memory serves, like Nor is knocked down, but he's still breathing. But then it's the kryptonite gas that does him in. So arguably, even though Clark was able to tap into this, yeah, maybe there was some element of him restraining it. Rob, to your point, it's like, it is interesting to me that they're not explicit. Like there's no follow-up conversation with Lois where she's like, oh my God, I can't believe, like, were you going to kill him? And he's like, no, Lois, like I knew how to hold it back. Like, they don't do that. Which lends itself to a conversation like this. But yeah, I mean, there's certainly precedent before and after this for Superman killing Zod. So if he were willing to go that far, I guess we can kind of square it. But especially in terms of this version of the character and everything he articulated and what we see in the aftermath of that battle. Yeah, I like to think he was able to kind of curb it somewhat. All right, but yeah, their version of Zod. And this is the period of time across media where we're in like interim territory. Like we don't have Zod. And even when it is Zod, it's like not the true Zod, it's the pocket universe Zod and things like that. So Nor very much in that category. All right, Chris, your first round pick.
Well, I did not think this would be possible having the last of the round, but I am going to fully take advantage. And with my first pick, I am going to choose Tempus.
Dude, I was writing it before you even said it. I
had to.
So take it away. Why? Not that I think we know, but take it away. Why Zod? Why Zod? Why Tempus?
I think it was the reason you alluded to. After Lex, like he's the clear number 2 villain. He's reoccurring. He's formidable. He has a hatred for both Superman and Lois. And every time he's on the show, it's fun. He's that level of campy, but he's also shown that he's smart and intelligent and can outwit those around him. And then the whole president storyline was fascinating too, and the levels that went to. And I think it's powerful to be able to bring somebody from the future without having it be too he doesn't have so much technology that's way above his time. It's more just that he's intellectual and he kind of knows where it goes and is able to use that to fool the people around him. And it's just a very powerful foil for Superman and Lois.
Yeah, I mean, Tempus is absolutely the number 2 villain of the whole show, and there's an argument to be made that he may be the number 1 villain of the whole show. And I actually I have a tier marked master planner. And Tempus was the first one I wrote down for the master planner slot, but then I crossed him out because I was like, do you know what? Someone else is going to say Tempus, and we'll bring it up then. He's excellent, and they do such amazing stuff with him. And Tempus Fugitive, the first episode he shows up in, I mean, that's arguably the best episode of the whole show. But also Tempus Anyone, where Lois goes to the dark dimension, and he's running for mayor of Metropolis. And she has to create that version of Superman. That's a fantastic episode as well. And you can draw a lot of parallels between Tempus and some of his political machinations and things that have happened in the real world since the show came out. And he's just wonderful. I believe Lane Davies has said that he actually did audition for Lex and didn't get it. So that's also interesting to think about as well. But yeah, no, I'm a huge Tempus fan, and I always maintain that if I ever get to write Superman comics, I will be introducing Tempus from Lois and Clark and Gus Gorman from Superman 3 into the proper mainstream DC universe.
Right on. No, I mean, he is absolutely a top tier Lois and Clark villain for all those reasons. And yeah, I mean, that's kind of an interesting thing. I mean, we sang Lex Luthor's praises, and I think he was fantastic on the show, but obviously not original to this show. I feel like if we're considering the best villain who's also the most Lois and Clark, the New Adventures of Superman, it's gotta be Tempus. And the fact that the stakes are as high as they are with him, yet also as personal as they are. It's like we have time travel, rewriting history, but how is he going about it? Going to Smallville in the 60s to kill the infant baby. And you get this emotional scene with Lois and Clark and his young parents. Like it's fantastic. And yeah, even the return appearances, like you're saying, Tempus, anyone. It's very Grant Morrison-esque. It's like in a world where Superman doesn't exist, what happens? You have to create him. And then, of course, the presidential run as John Doe in season 4. And yes, there are specific lines and slogans that are eerily reminiscent of what we've lived through in the real world. So definitely was clocking that as I was watching. Soulmates, that's a bit of a throwaway. Unless you can anyone can make a case for that one.
Apparently that was originally written for Lex Luthor, and John Shea couldn't do it, and they changed it to Tempus. And once you find that out, you're like, oh, that makes a lot more sense, because it as much as I love Tempus, it bugs me a bit that they in that episode they established that he's like Superman's arch nemesis throughout time and space and alternate timelines and past lives and all that. Like, no, that should be Lex Luthor. Like, come on, guys, and the whole thing about Tempus being in love with Lois and that, it's like that doesn't track at all, So once you find out, oh no, this was supposed to be Lex Luthor, you're like, oh, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, but 4 out of 5 were absolutely amazing, and wonder what subsequent appearances would have looked like had he returned. I agree, it's like crazy that we haven't seen him make the jump to comics or other media. I feel like this is a really rich character to explore further. So yeah, fantastic pick.
Actually, before we move on from Tempus, shout out to the unaired 5th and 6th season fanfics. Craig Byrne, if you know Craig, he'll tell you a lot more about this. There was definitely a fan fiction story written in Lois and Clark's kind of pretend 5th season where Tempus travels back to season 1 and prevents and teams up with Lex Luthor, and they team up to prevent Lois and Clark from ever meeting, and it was a really, really cool story. So go and check that out if you haven't already.
Oh, that's cool. I like that. Oh, and the other thing I always forget is that he's not in the season 2 finale, but the villain of that episode, Mazik, he gets a hold of Tempus's journal that reveals Superman's secret identity, and that fuels that whole episode. So he's not there, but his presence is still felt in yet another episode. All right, so with our snake-style flow here, we're going to head right into round 2. And Chris, you are kicking off this round, so you get back-to-back picks here. Who's your next one?
Well, I missed an opportunity when I was announcing my first pick to just say, duh. It was lost on me, but I had to include it there. Okay, so my next one, maybe a little bit of a stretch. I don't know how this is taken by other fans, but I know this is one of my more favorite villains, because I thoroughly enjoyed this episode of the show. And as we're coming into the season, the Christmas season, now I am going to go with Mixtapes.
Yes.
That's a good, I love that episode.
I love that
episode so much.
I don't know how the take on the character stands with a lot of fans or not, but for the show and for the guest star, Howie Mandel, and having that interaction and the just the fun seasonal episode, it's my number 2.
Yeah. Rob, how would you say Howie Mandel's Mixtapes compares to the Mixie on Superboy?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is the perfect example. He looks nothing like the comic book character, but I would say he's, I think it's a far more effective version for sure. He's a lot more menacing, I think, than maybe Mixtapes should be, I would argue. He feels more like a true villain through and through, as opposed to most versions of Mixie. He's kind of just a trickster. He's just sort of just having fun. He doesn't really mean anything truly villainous by it. This guy really wants to F shit up in this. I think he's really strong, and you kind of think Howie Mandel as Mixtapes, how's that going to turn out? I think he does a fine job, and this absolutely is one of my favorite episodes of the show. I remember I used to review the episodes of this show for the Superman homepage, and I remember coming to this episode thinking, oh, this is, I don't remember this one being good. This is going to be another crummy Christmas episode. What's this going to be? And then I was floored by it. That speech Clark gives to Mixie at the end, where he's like, as long as there's an ounce of hoping, I'll never give up. It's one of my favorite Superman moments in the whole show. It's really, really good, and I just wish he'd popped up more on the show, to be honest, because it's a really durable character you can do a lot with, and you can do a lot with him on a TV budget. The things Mixtapes, yes, he has magical powers and so on, but he doesn't have magical powers that can't be achieved with just like basic editing, you know. And he's kind of very comparable with Q from Star Trek: The Next Generation. Any Star Trek fans will know what I'm talking about. Like, they got a lot of mileage out of that character, and I think Mixie is very similar to that. I think they could have done a lot more with him. And yeah, no, he's a great pick. I really like him in the show.
Yeah, so you could even tap into the comic book schedule of how he can return every certain thing and bring him back one episode a season.
Yeah, man, that's a great pick. It's such a standout episode, but also, I mean, you're really, I don't know, man. If we're going to, in terms of sheer power here, I think Chris is ahead. He's got time travel and magic locked up. So that's great. But yeah, it's like, on paper, would Howie Mandel be my ideal Mixus Pitalik? No, but he works for all of these reasons that we're talking about. And maybe it speaks to the versatility of the character, but also the strength of this episode, where he creates this time loop so that it never goes past a certain point on Christmas Eve. And the whole idea is, if you take away tomorrow, there's no hope. And without hope, Superman is powerless. And then you see throughout the day how Superman is persisting, not losing hope, instilling hope in others, and ultimately saving the day through that inspiration. And of course, Lois plays a big role in that as well, because she's the next one to sort of shake free from the loop. But yeah, you know, I'm so glad to hear you guys talk about this, because I've been a fan. I can't remember why I specifically rewatched that episode over the past few years, but I did, and I really liked it. And then when I hit it again in this rewatch, I'm like, man, I love this. And I'm like, is this a hot take? Because I don't know that there's a ton of love for like the Howie Mandel Mixie. So I love hearing this, because I'm a big fan as well. Right on.
Yeah, all the takes on Mixie are jaded in my eyes from my experience with Smallville and how that played out.
Yeah, that was unfortunate. That was unfortunate with McHale. Okay. All right. My next pick is season 1's Jason Trask.
Oh, yeah.
From Strange Visitor and the Green Glow of Home, which is an absolute standout. Now, this is the government operative who is investigating Superman and his alien origins. We find out in his first appearance that Bureau 39 actually has the spaceship that Kal-El arrived in, and the orb that Clark pockets that lets him know that he's from the planet Krypton. And then in the Green Glow of Home makes it to Smallville. This is the episode that introduces Kryptonite, and Clark is weakened. And ultimately, Trask learns that Clark is Superman, and we get like such a badass fight between a depowered Clark and Trask in the water. Just the physicality, the intensity, it was great. And it's one of these things, Zach and I talked about this with Lex, in terms of Lex's motivation, or the motivation for his hatred of Superman. And in this iteration, like, we don't really get the deep kind of ideological, philosophical opposition to Superman, but I feel like Trask, in certain respects, represents that. And certainly the xenophobia and this whole idea about he's this alien outsider and he's plotting against us, and the humans who harbored him are traitors. And it's a perspective that you don't see a lot of, right? Like, you know, think about something like Man of Steel. It's like, oh, how would the world react to Superman? They don't really have so much of that here, but I feel like Trask goes a long way towards representing that. He's an original villain. He's an exceedingly rare, maybe even totally isolated, I can't remember offhand, in the first season of a recurring villain. So to have somebody who popped up a couple of times, now you or audience, you might say, okay, your team so far is Lord Nor and Jason Trask. How do you reconcile that? But I feel like this is an enemy of my enemy is my friend sort of situation.
Absolutely.
I feel like in order to take down Superman, Trask would be able to get over his xenophobia and forge this alliance with Lord Nor. And I feel like Nor would appreciate and recognize the kind of tactical insight that Jason Trask would have in terms of earthly military operations. So I feel like this could work. So that's my second round pick.
No, it's an excellent choice, and you've reminded me. I completely agree with you that Trask would use superpowered people to his advantage, even though he hates them and thinks that they're heralds of an alien invasion and so on. And it reminds me, like, that's kind of what Colonel Stryker does in those X-Men movies, where, you know, he's very much using mutants against other mutants and stuff like that. Trask is a great pick, and part of why he's a good. Yes, he is specifically a threat to Clark and Superman, but all of his appearances bring Lois and Clark together a bit more and closer together, especially that wonderful green glow at home. She comes to Smallville for the first time and she's a real fish out of water there, and she's kind of treating them like kind of hicks and stuff like that, but then she's actually finding out that no, these are complex, interesting, funny people. It's a really, really strong episode. I kind of come up against the kryptonite physics of it. Like, I'm like, okay, so wait, kryptonite takes away his powers? That doesn't really line up with the later episodes where he's able to like use his heat vision while he's being exposed to kryptonite. So anyway, you can't think about that stuff, but it's a wonderful episode. Yeah. Oh, and shout out to the fact that Trask showed up on Superman and Lois, by the way, the much later show, that one of the soldiers was called Jason Trask.
Oh, I think I totally missed that. Oh, right on. Very cool.
Trask poses a different kind of threat in that he has the government behind him, and because he's exposing Superman as an alien that is confrontational, like his ploy is that he's confrontational to Earth, he must be stopped. Superman can't really go against him because of that, and then it proves the point and makes it look bad. So he's got to go around and find different ways to combat what Trask represents, and I think that makes him a formidable foe.
Actually, as the Irish guy here, I have to point out as well, there's a great scene where Trask is doing a lie detector test on all the reporters of the Daily Planet, and I think he's questioning Lois, and he's like, "Do you believe Superman is the herald of an alien invasion or something like that?" And she says, "Yeah, and leprechauns are working for the IRA." Just nice little acknowledgement that Ireland exists in the DC universe.
Yeah, no, like that whole lie detector sequence was great. I mean, that's the other thing too, the fact that they delve into this territory as early as they do. It's the second episode. I know they were aired out of order, but like it's the second episode. So, and Trask also represents all of the fears that the Kents have in this show and across iterations of the government showing up and asking questions and trying to take him away or destroy him. And so I love how that plays out. And, you know, to this point about how every appearance brings Lois and Clark together, very true. I mean, in his first appearance, he throws them out of a plane, but they have that kiss before then, right? It's this ploy so she can whisper to him for them to make their move. But, you know, forwarding that along as well. So yeah, Trask, very, very rich character. I'm glad he was still available for me to draft here. All right, Rob, now you have back-to-back picks. So so close us out on round 2 here. Who's your next pick?
Okay, so I wanted to pick someone who was a good kind of infiltrator type. So she's able to. She's a female villain. She's able to infiltrate, and she's also a public figure. I've picked Diana Stride from the Top Copy episode of season 2, played by Raquel Welch. She's kind of this. She's the host of this tabloid journalism show called Top Copy, which is a kind of a Lois and Clark version of Hard Copy, which was a real show in the 90s. It's like tabloid magazine trash type stuff. But then we find out over the course of the story that she's also an intergang agent. An intergang is a huge part of Lois and Clark, especially season 2 and into a bit of season 3. And in Lois and Clark, they're kind of like a Spectre-like organization. If people know their James Bond, that they're clearly inspired by Spectre. Like they have these secret meetings where it's all video calls, and they've rooms with kind of hidden components in them and all this kind of thing. And she is one of their kind of reluctant sleeper agents. And over the course of the episode, we see her take on a lot of disguises. She uses kryptonite lipstick and like very nearly kills Superman. She does a lot of cool stuff, and I just think she'd work well in any kind of revenge scenario, because she'd be able to infiltrate and use her influence in the public to dissuade public opinion, and she could do a lot of cool stuff, and she can seduce people as well, as we see in the show. So
yeah, oh, right on. You know, it's funny because I kind of, we're deep enough in, I'll share, you know, I sort of made my different categories, and one of them was something very akin to what you laid out there, and this whole idea of infiltration or disguise. And yeah, I feel like she's a great pick for all of those reasons. And there is this added component because we have others who are masters of disguise and things like that, but the sort of public persona cover is a whole other angle and a potential tool to utilize to influence public opinion, right? Like you said. And on top of that, she's the secret assassin. It's funny because as I was rewatching this, I'm saying to myself, okay, Raquel Welch and Sherman Helmsley. Like, there are numerous instances of the stunt casting, but it's one of those things. And I know the show is 30 years old, but I feel like even then, I don't know. I mean, certainly like as a kid watching it at the time, I wasn't like, ooh, Raquel Welch, but my dad was probably like, oh, this is great. I'll always go back to Boy Meets World, because they talk about this a lot too. It's like when they would do stunt casting, it was people like the writers of the show were fans of when they were younger. Like they brought in like Soupy Sales, and the cast was like, the cast of kids were like, who's this? but great cast. That's a great pick, man. All right. So far we're 2 rounds in, and Rob has selected Lenny Stoke from Wall of Sound, Diana Stride from Top Copy. I have selected Lord Nor and Jason Trask, and Chris has selected Tempus and Mixius Pitalik. So this is why I wanted to do this, because we clearly each have our own kind of plan of attack here. So I love to see it. We love digging into epic comic book runs, but what about the art of the single issue? Single Bound is a new podcast series hosted by married couple Amy and Logan as they review single issues of comics. And if the title also makes you think of Superman, you're not alone, as the Man of Steel is Logan's favorite character and a regular topic of discussion on Single Bound. Listen and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube, and follow the show on Instagram at Single Bound Podcast. As a Superman fan, have you ever wondered what would happen if a person who knew barely anything about comics decided to absorb hundreds of Superman stories from all eras and media? Robbo is that kind of person, and that's exactly what he's done on a new show called This Podcast Will Never Die. The first season, called Superman Will Never Die, starts with all the unexpected ways the Man of Steel stood out from the pulp heroes on the newsstands in 1938. Listen and subscribe to This Podcast Will Never Die, and you'll never look at Superman's trunks the same way again. Fat Moose Comics, established in 1982, is New Jersey's best and oldest comic book store. Led by current owner Sean Hendricks, Moose has that rare, old-school comic shop feel and camaraderie, yet also remains a welcoming space for new fans. If you're looking for something and they don't have it, they can probably get it for you. They know a guy. Visit Fat Moose in Whippany the next time you are in the Garden State, and be sure to reach out via the Fat Moose Comics Facebook page. Aw Yeah Comics celebrates everything that is wonderful about comics, toys, artwork, and the joy they bring to people. Visit them in person at one of their 3 locations: Harrison, New York, Muncie, Indiana, or Skokie, Illinois, home to our pal, Sweet Sweet Bernie. If you have children and have been looking for a family-friendly store, look no further. Join Aw Yeah for exciting events, including creator signings, how-tos, and more. Visit awyeahcomics.com and follow them on social media. Their name says exactly how they feel about it. Say it with me now. Aw yeah. All right, let's head into round 3. And Rob, as we snake around here, you have back-to-back picks. So who are you drafting next?
Okay, so I'm really, really grateful that you have decided to allow Lex Luthor offspring to be included in this list, because I feel like this guy's kind of association with Lex Luthor is kind of tacked on in that episode. I'm talking about Jackson Xavier. That's Jackson with an X, from the episode Virtually Destroyed, which had like an incomparable impact on me as a young man, or like a little boy watching, going, oh my goodness, virtual reality? You put on these goggles and you're transported into this computer world? Sign me up. That sounds incredible. I was obsessed with that episode as a kid, and this guy, he's kind of like, he's a TV bootleg version of Edward Nygma from Batman Forever, but I think he's just great. And we find out over the course of the episode that he's Lex Luthor's son, and he's trying to, I guess, access this hidden bank account or something that Lex had, and he's trying to figure out what the password is, and he thinks that Lois might know this because Lois was briefly engaged to Lex. It is a fascinating episode, and like as you kind of get into season 3 of Lois and Clark, they do a lot more kind of Silver Age type plots, and I feel like this is a real 1990s with a capital N version of a Silver Age plot. It's like Superman and Jimmy Olsen get transported to a strange topsy-turvy world, and they have to figure it out to save Lois or something like that. I absolutely love Virtually Destroyed. One of the writers of the episode, by the way, is the actor who plays Clark and Superman in this, and I got to ask him about it once, and he told me that he was a huge gamer, and that's where the inspiration for the episode came. So Jackson Xavier.
Right on. When you said offspring, I didn't know which direction you were going, but I like that. Yeah, it's definitely a memorable episode. When you said it had a big impact on you, I thought you were going to say that's what inspired you to save yourself from marriage, a la Clark, because this is the episode we find out that he's a virgin, which was a bold choice, I think.
And it's a choice I don't agree with, because when you hear him talking about in these earlier season 1 episodes where he's talking about, you know, all these incredible things he's done around the world, and I think there's a line where a princess in such and such a country taught him how to dance. And you're like, this guy's a virgin? I don't think so.
Agreed. Also, we talked about this a little bit a couple episodes ago, but I'll unpack this further, because when you look at the comics of this era, where Clark was the guy and he's this ladies' man, very desirable to women, that this show is clearly taking its cues from. I mean, there are multiple romantic encounters. They're not explicit in these stories, but I think that was more of a function of the time and the fact that you could have kids reading them, as opposed to saying that something didn't happen. I mean, there's that red-haired waitress he works with in the World of Metropolis miniseries, Ruby. Then there's that woman, Simone, in his backstory when he's traveling the world in France, who really, takes him under her wing. And then even Lois and Clark themselves in the comics, there's that very memorable moment when Superman returns from the dead and he's talking to Lois and he's trying to convince her that it's really him. And he's like, what about that rainy night in July and she cuts him off. But I think the implication is pretty clear there. So yeah, it's just like a wild choice to me that they went with that here. And yet, Rob, to your point, I don't think that lines up with the worldly Clark who we met in the first season of the show. So, but that's really not relevant to Jackson Xavier, but I always think about that with this episode.
To get back to Jackson himself, I guess part of the pitch was you need someone who can wield technology to that sort of scale. And his plan almost part of my criteria as well is his plan almost works, and it's only that they're able to outsmart him at the end. But he creates this labyrinthine, ultra realistic virtual version of Metropolis, and he does fool Lois and Clark for a good chunk of the episode, and he almost got away with it. And last thing I'll say, the guy who plays Chip Shrek, and I'm so sorry I can't remember the actor's name, he pops up in this as Jackson Xavier's kind of virtual fantasy avatar, and he's this big bemuscled Fabio-haired Adonis, and he's able to absolutely beat the crap out of Superman in a virtual fight. And I'm always like, that's this show's version of Doomsday. It's like the closest we got to Doomsday was this Fabio looking dude.
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, any thoughts on Jackson?
As soon as you started to say that it was a relative of Luthor, kind of tacked on at the end, and I knew I was lost and this would not make it back to me. But I'm a big fan of this character in this episode as well. This episode sticks out in my mind as one of the more memorable ones, even though I haven't seen it in a while. And the virtual reality of it, it's great. And he would have a reason to want revenge, although I think he's one of the ones that didn't make it out, right?
He gets trapped, and then at the very last shot of the episode is like you see Lois's computer screen, and it's just like the ghostly
he has
image
a way
of
to
him.
return and get revenge.
Yeah, and so he never comes back. So Jackson Xavier, I put in the same category as Paul Wesley's character on Smallville, Lucas Luthor. This lost Luthor relative who's there once and never seen or heard of again. But yeah, and in terms of his motivation, the fact that, he worked for Lex, or at least one of his companies, but Lex didn't acknowledge him as his son, and he hatched this whole scheme. And yeah, definitely very 90s in terms of the virtual reality. I think where I really feel that is when you have Jimmy hacking into this VR simulation, from his desktop at the planet. It's like, I don't know, but all right.
He's literally wearing a Nintendo Power Glove. Go back and watch the episode. He has a Nintendo Power Glove on when he's doing the hacking. It's insane.
Well, then don't they just pull it out of thin air too when they're inside to do more hacking to get them where they need to be?
Yeah, wild. All right, that's a good one. All right. Oh man, this is actually a little tough here. All right, I'm really kind of waffling here, but maybe I'll continue on our little theme here, and I am going to take the other Luthor offspring. I'm going to take Mr. Smith, a.k.a. Lex Luthor Jr., from the Lex Files, this late series arc that introduced the son of Lex. And of course, there's this whole facade where we first meet Leslie Luckabee, the new owner of the Daily Planet from Australia, shades of Lex Luthor II from the comic books of the era. And he's got this accomplice who lives in the sewers and is disfigured, and he's got long hair and he's dressed in black and he can't stand the light. And then, of course, it turns out that that shadowy figure is the actual son of Lex Luthor, and that quote unquote Leslie Luckabee was this busboy struggling actor who Smith found and trained and gave him this whole script. And I pick him for a few reasons. One, this, just like kind of core memories and experiences with the show. Like this arc was like seared into my brain, and I wasn't scared of Smith or Lex Jr., whatever we want to call him, but there was definitely a creepiness factor. And it's funny, like looking at him now, the makeup that's kind of that represents his disfigurement over his eye, it's not even that extreme. But there was just kind of this vibe about him, this creepiness that I found like really, really intriguing. It's wild to me that this arc didn't end the season, right? Because after this, we get a body swap episode, we get another Toy Man, and then we get Fathead. It's like, man, this would have been a real powerful punch to end the season, and then ultimately it would have been the end of the show. But so there's that memory from watching as a kid. It keeps the Lex Luthor legacy alive, and in this swing of episodes, Lex Jr. finds his father's final recording that reveals Clark is Superman, so that ups the stakes here. And on top of the planning and the scheming generally, you also have the kind of the business maneuvering, the fact that he is scooping up Lex's former business empire and he's putting that together. So yeah, I feel like it's an attack. It's a very well-planned, well-coordinated attack on multiple fronts with kind of a little bit in shades of Diana Stride of like subterfuge and disguise on top of it. So yeah, I'm going to go with Lex Luthor Jr., AKA Mr. Smith, as my next pick.
The mystery factor of it all really drives why, like you said, you kind of fear him or fear the possibility or where's this going to go? Because when you figure out how much he's done to get with Leslie in place and all that before the revelation, he's clearly a smart guy.
Yeah. Rob, where do you land on the whole Lex Files arc deep in the series here?
I have to admit I'm not a huge fan of that arc. Every time I watch it, it feels like the show acknowledging that things have gotten a little bit too goofy, and they try to course correct by doing this like ultra dark arc, and it always feels a little bit too cheesy and a bit too low rent. I don't think they fully pull it off. It is interesting though, and it's very ambitious, and I like the idea that Leslie Luckabee isn't who he seems to be. I think the Australia thing is probably just a coincidence. I can't accept that deep into Lois and Clark that they were still taking any inspiration from the comics, But yeah, no, it's an interesting pick. I'm glad it came up, and it's funny. You were saying that it had an indelible impact on you as a kid. When I reach these episodes, every time I do a rewatch, I'm like, God, I don't remember these at all. It feels like I think I might have watched these episodes for the first time when the show came out on DVD. I was like, wait, what? I don't remember any of this, because I do remember stuff from later in season 4, but that stretch of, I think it's like 4 episodes, I really don't remember them that well. So it's interesting that you actually, it's like burnt into your brain the way it is.
This is what I think happened with me. So I talked about this before. Like I watched this live from 93 to 97, but I was a little kid, 6 to 10. And then I watched them again in syndication on TNT here. And I think generally those viewings are the ones that I remember more, but those late season 4 episodes, right? Like I'm older now in those original viewings. So I think that's why like they stand out to me a little bit more. Like I was older, I was remembering them more, and it just kind of made that impact. So I feel like they probably just made more of an imprint on me during those initial viewings. And that's why like they stuck with me so much. And I also just like, I remember the commercials, like the Lex Files. Like I just have that memory. That's clearly fueling a lot of me here, but yeah, that's my pick. All right. So Chris, to close out round 3 here, who you got next?
Okay. I'm going to continue building a powerhouse. And again, the take on the comic book character, not there, but I enjoyed the episode of Lois and Clark, so I'm going to go with. Actually, you know what? Can it be the pair? Can it be the Bob and Carol of it all? I mean, Deathstroke, yes, but the fact that it's a mirror to Lois and Clark, like they're working together. They're a couple. There's the secret identity under the shirt. There's the secret powers, and then you have the double date side of it. So the Bob Earl Deathstroke of it all. That's going to be my next pick. A little bit about my history with Lois and Clark, and I know this doesn't play very well in the time of day that we are in now, but going into it back in the day, I'm from upstate New York. I'm a big fan of the football team, the Buffalo Bills, and Dean Cain actually played for the Bills for a short time before he blew out his knee, and he brought the Bills into Lois and Clark a few times. And there's a funny line at the end of this episode where he's talking to Grant Gandel, and they're like, "Hey, do you like the Buffalo Bills?" And Gandel's like, "I have to. I own them." And I thought that was a nice little nod, and those kind of things like stick home to me. But the episode itself more. He is a powerful foe with the magnetic powers or whatever it was that he had, and it's not Deathstroke. It's not the character Deathstroke from the comics, but they got to use the name, and I'm going to add him to my lineup.
Hey, no, I co-sign on your choice. I had included, well, and also a combo, I think in this instance is okay. Like this, we have a married couple. There are a couple of sibling duos. I think we can treat them as a unit. And no, like I had flagged Bob as well for the power. And then yes, when you add on to that, the fact that we have another married couple, that's this mirror of Lois and Clark. It's funny because, I've been saying this in all the episodes, like season 4, I wasn't expecting to enjoy as much upon rewatch. And then as I got to it, I'm like, oh, like there's good stuff in here. And this is an episode in particular. I'm like, oh, the Antonio Sabato Jr. episode, and it's not really Deathstroke. But no, I liked it. I think in terms of a new type of dynamic or challenge for them as a married couple to pair them up with Bob and Carol. And then, yeah, just in terms of sheer power, his power's like they're magnetic based, right? Yeah. So, he really puts Clark through the ringer. No, that's a solid pick, man.
Yeah, I always make the point with this character, if they didn't call him Deathstroke and they called him Dr. Polaris, we'd be having a very different conversation because he literally is that character. Well, power-wise at least. I have a tier marked Muscle, and I had this guy down, and I was gonna maybe do Metallo from season 2, who is obviously a more faithful adaptation of a comic book character. But this guy is more he's more of a formidable foe than Metallo was in that episode. Like if anyone remembers, Superman beats Metallo with his heat vision, which it feels like you shouldn't be able to beat Metallo that way. It really bothered me even as a kid. Whereas Deathstroke really gives him a run for his money in this episode, and it's a really cool power. And that scene of the two of the guys just like grappling each other, kind of wrestling each other, that's one of the moments that's really burnt into my head watching that as a kid. And they do this kind of cool effect where they invert all the colors, I think, on screen, and it's really striking. So yeah, no, that's a really good pick. And what you were saying there as well about how it's like a villainous super couple, the same way that Lois and Clark are, and he does the shirt rip, and they have the marital squabbles just like Lois and Clark are, so we get to mirror those two dynamics. That was a really cool thing, and I wish they'd maybe done that a bit more on the show. So yeah, great choice.
Yeah, it could have been a more multi-arc type thing. Maybe have the couple be established a little bit more before you lead into the fact that they're evil.
Yeah, something like that would have been cool. But yeah, Rob, I went through a similar internal calculus in terms of the powerhouses, because I'm like, yeah, there's a case to be made for Metallo, and especially with the kryptonite, but it's like, yeah, Superman just melts him. He that's what I was saying at the beginning in terms of thinking about how they were defeated. It's like, yes, Clark ultimately prevails over Bob, but it's like, it's a harder lift as opposed to Metallo. It's like, and I guess they got to a point in the episode. It's like, well, what more can we do? Oh, let's just melt him. But he went down so easily. So yeah, no, I think Bob is Chris, your lineup is stacked here in terms of sheer force. All right, so that's the end of round 3. So now as we snake around here, Chris, take us into round 4. Who's your next pick?
Okay, I'm going to break tradition a little bit with this. I've gone like full on comic book style characters and power and magic and time travel in there. I guess this is kind of a little bit like time travel, but I'm going to go with Al Capone as my next villain. And I know he was part of the group that was cloned because they wanted to alter their, the scientists or whatever that brought him back wanted to work on them psychologically. But just the fact that once he gets out, just falls back into his old methods, takes over. He's running his criminal enterprise again, and I think that is a type of bringing him in. He could be the leader of the group and orchestrate and provide them with the funding or whatever they need for their revenge plot against Superman. So I think he would round the team out pretty well.
Al Capone. I like how he was consistent with his pronunciation, even as everyone else was calling him Al Capone. Yeah, that's an interesting pick. When I rewatched that episode, I totally forgot that this show had an Emil Hamilton.
Yeah.
Right?
Same.
Because I always think of Dr. Klein, right? Always think of Dr. Klein at Star Labs, which, let me just say this real quick, because I don't know when else I'll have an opportunity in these episodes. I like Dr. Klein generally, but I really love how, as we got towards the end of the series, they started kind of hinting at this more wild private life that he has. Like there's the episode where Superman catches him in the parking lot and he's getting on his motorcycle. Yeah. And then there's that young female doctor who's very interested in him and I'm just like, I feel like had the show continued, they would have really leaned into this, where he's always coming from or going to some weird activity. And it's just like the hidden life of Dr. Klein. But yeah, we also had an Emil Hamilton, and this was a big episode. I mean, Clark gets quote unquote killed.
Yeah.
And has to play along with this until he's able to. The explanation for how he came back is like Superman froze him, and then they used the cloning procedure. It's like, all right, a little wonky there, but it tapped into some interesting ideas, right? That is, such a theme in the series about the importance of being Clark, right? Because there's that great scene with Jonathan and Martha where they're like, well, no, you can still be with Lois and Perry and Jimmy. He's like, no, it's not the same. It's not. They don't treat me the same way. It's like Clark listens to Lois complain and goes to ball games with Jimmy and Perry. Like, I can't do that. So, great episode. And William Devane, who played Al Capone, a lot. I mean, obviously he's been in a ton of stuff, but for me, I always go to the Kiefer Sutherland 24 series where he was the Secretary of Defense and later the president. Like, I love him in that. So,
and wasn't he the father, the father of
Audrey?
Of Audrey, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm ashamed to say I always think of Knots Landing, which was a soap my mother watched in the 90s. I think he was a pretty big character in that. And let's not forget, ladies and gentlemen, he was POTUS in The Dark Knight Rises in that tiny little scene. You see William Devane pop up as the president. This is a really fun episode, and it's important to say as well, I think they did kick off a pretty extreme crime wave, Capone and his gang. So like he was a very effective. Yeah, Bonnie and Clyde and who's the other guy there? The guy they catch outside the movie theater.
Dillinger.
Christian Bale played him. Dillinger, yeah. So like he was an effective mobster even in the modern day for the short period he was in Metropolis. So yeah, no, I like that pick as well. Am I right in saying the clones have super strength, or am I thinking of? I'm thinking of the Nazis in season 3. I think it's very briefly established that they have super strength from whatever cloning or. What have you got there? The cryogenic freezing process. Yeah.
I don't think the gangsters had any enhanced abilities. Yeah, but all right, cool. Yeah, cool pick. Yeah, and that also gives you some that strategy and kind of street smarts rounding out the crew there. Right on. All right, so my round 4 pick. So I don't want this to be a total sausage fest here. We want to kind of vary our picks here. You get a little bit of sex appeal, introduce some new dynamics here. Also, I have my powerhouse, I've got my government operative, and now I've got my underground strategist, but I need a public face. So I'm going Mindy Church for my next pick here. Now, Rob, you were mentioning this before about Intergang, and I agree. It's like once we move past Lex on the show, right, we enter this Intergang phase. I don't feel like this ever really came together. I feel like it was an interesting idea and it pops up a few times. I would have loved for this to be more of a presence and more of a through line throughout the rest of the series or even just season 2. I feel like we mostly get it in the form of the Church family. We get Bill Church Sr., Peter Boyle, then Bill Church Jr., Bruce Campbell, and Mindy Church, who's initially the wife of Senior and then has an affair with Junior. And then what's really wild, but anyway, so like Intergang ultimately ends up primarily being concentrated in the Church family. So I feel like, I don't know, it just didn't totally come together, but I liked all of them and the performers especially. And what's interesting about Mindy is that, her last episode is the season 3 Christmas episode where she commissions a scientist to create this virus. to make Superman sick, and she gets a hold of the spaceship, and they're able to use the microbes to create this virus. So really puts Superman through the ringer. And at the end of that episode, like, she gets away, she drives off, and it really seems like, hey, they're setting her up to come back. And I don't know if it was an actress availability thing or they just changed their mind or whatnot, but it really felt like there was more to do with that character. But I like her and the overall vibe, and just kind of having that kind of public facing business facade. That's kind of earns her a spot on my list. So Mindy Church is my next one.
Yeah, it's interesting. I completely agree. Intergang didn't go anywhere. And what I suspect happened was in season 2 they tried to retool the show to be more of an action adventure show for dudes, and they really wanted to bring in more of a male audience. And if you watch the top half of season 2, there's a lot more Superman action, a lot more kind of daring do and kind of action adventure type stuff. And I think Intergang sat nicely into that. But then halfway through season 2, I guess the ratings were tanking, and then they brought John Shea back, and there was a load of romance in that episode, and they were like, okay, so people are responding to the romance, let's lean more into that. And they leaned away from Intergang, and then the villains kind of started getting sillier and sillier. I feel like Intergang was just kind of lost in the shuffle of the constant kind of revamps and retoolings the show went through. I'm not the hugest fan of Mindy Church. I feel she gets a bit grating with the kind of, I didn't mean to, the kind of like sultry 1940s screwball comedy voice she has. I see the appeal though, and my God, like, somebody was watching Superman 3 when they came up with this character, because she's basically the exact same character that Pamela Stevenson plays in Superman 3. She kind of presents herself as this ditzy blonde who is dating the main arch villain, but secretly she's a genius and she's a master planner, and very few people actually know this. And then, as you say, like, over the course of Lois and Clark, she seizes more and more control, and then she kind of just disappears. Don't know what the story was there. There's no reason why she couldn't have popped up in season 4, and they could have wrapped that up nicely. But yeah, like, for me, Intergang, like, I wish they had sort of developed that story a bit more, because Peter Boyle especially had the potential to be the big bad of season 2, and they kind of just didn't develop it properly. So yeah, it's a shame.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a missed opportunity. But yeah, I mean, and with Mindy, I think an intriguing character in and of herself, but also having the access to Intergang. So now we're kind of widening our network here. So yeah, that's my pick. Any thoughts on Intergang or Church or Mindy, Chris?
No, I think of those choices, Mindy would be the ideal for the show to have on your team.
Right on. All right. So Rob, we're at the end of round 4 here. Who's your next pick?
Okay, I hate myself for saying this, but it does need to be said. So one of Superman's, not even that it's a weakness, but one of the things he is vulnerable to is magic, and he has no control over the forces of magic. And one of the villains in this show who wields magical, mystical, Celtic abilities is none other than Patrick Sullivan from When Irish Eyes Are Killing. One of the most heinous examples of an American actor doing a crap Irish accent. But he does put it to Superman in the end of the episode. He wears a big Doctor Doom looking costume, and he shoots some lasers at him, and he does give him a pretty good fight. So I got to pick him. And I know for a fact that if Alan, my co-host for All-Star Superfan podcast, that is, if he was here, he would absolutely have him on his draft. So Patrick Sullivan, there it is.
All right. Once again, I would not have expected that, because I would have felt like, oh no, like, this representation was not what it should have been. Rob would stay away from this, but I appreciate the magical angle. I really thought you were going in another direction. I actually started writing out something and crossed it off because I was wrong. But yeah, that was an episode. Thinking back over the course of the show, it's like, the vast majority of episodes were grounded in reality or some sort of science or science fiction. Even as it got outlandish, there was still some scientific basis. But, this was an instance where, no, we were actually veering into magical territory here. So intriguing on its own right. And obviously this catches the show at this point where Lois and Clark, he's proposed, she knows the secret, they're in a very nebulous place. And then Patrick Sullivan is this former boyfriend of hers when she was studying abroad or whatever. And he comes back and he makes a play for her and Clark's jealous. And, it serves a function in that episode.
I just have to point out as well, because every time Patrick Sullivan comes up, I have to make this point. The whole plot of the episode is he's trying to get these ancient stones, these ancient gems, the gems of the ancient ones or something they're called. And the whole thing is that his ancestors, generations ago in Ireland, I guess, these gems were taken from his ancestors when the Romans invaded. Guess what, fellas? The Romans never invaded Ireland, so doesn't track. Sorry.
Oh man! All right, so we have our druid category here is filled. All right, that's round 4. So now as we head into round 5, Rob, you have back-to-back picks here. And if round 5 ends up being our last one, then this is your final pick to complete your Superman Revenge Squad. I mean, we can see we might have enough time to add a 6th, but this could be the last pick.
Okay, so I did want to pick another master planner. We've kind of mentioned a few already. I crossed Tempus off my list because I knew he was going to come up. The master planners that I have actually selected are Tim and Amber Lake. From the episode Don't Tug on Superman's Cape, Tim Lake is played by Jonathan Frakes from Star Trek The Next Generation, and his wife Amber is played by Jonathan Frakes' real life wife Jeannie Francis, who's a really well-known soap opera actress. And what I like about them is again, they nearly pull off their plan. They are kind of wealthy collectors. They have the arms of the Venus de Milo, which Lex had in season 1. They have the Batmobile, which we don't get a good look at, but it is literally the Tim Burton Batmobile. And then they hatch this plot to kidnap Superman and just have him as a trophy that they will just keep on display. And the way they do that is they find out about Lois and they trap her first, and then they force him into this room with a force field, and the only way he's able to escape is by taking a leaf out of Barry Allen's book and vibrating his molecules and phasing through the force field. It's a really, really cool kind of Superman maneuver, and it's a really, really fun episode. And I believe that that's the episode where they do all these kind of meta looks at like. There's like an I Love Lucy skit where it's Clark having a dream that him and Lois are married and they're like a sitcom couple, and then there's like a James Bond bit, and then there's one where it's kind of like an episode of the Mod Squad. They do all these kind of fun little sort of meta-fictional things in that episode. That's great, and Jonathan Frakes is just a really good villain, and so is Jeannie Francis. So they're my pick there.
It's funny with those little skits that they did. I understand why they picked the ones that they did, and it tied in thematically to what Lois and Clark were going through. I totally get that, but I'm saying to myself, well, could have had a George Reeves homage here. It would have been interesting to see something like that, but that's okay. Chris, any thoughts on this duo?
I had them on my list as potential candidates as well. I think that for all the reasons that you said. Again, the more strategic, the more overarching behind the scenes type supporting cast, solid addition to the team.
And they do something really interesting as well, in that they make their crimes appear to be the work of another original villain from the show, Bad Brain Johnson. And for a lot of the episode, Lois and Clark are on this wild goose chase trying to find Bad Brain Johnson, when actually it's the Lakes operating from behind the scenes the whole time, which is pretty cool.
All right, you made a good case for these. I'll be honest, they didn't make as strong or positive an impression on me, but there's something to be said. I mean, certainly the whole collector mentality as comic book fans and people in this world, I think we can relate on some level. Obviously, these people take it to an extreme, but it's like, they are successful. They only lose because of the fact that Superman pushes his abilities in a new way. It's funny, as of this recording, I very recently rewatched the Mysterious Cube episode of the George Reeves show, where there too, Superman has to figure out how to phase through a wall. But for that, they would have won. So yeah, they're pretty capable.
Actually, to talk about another George Reeves episode I always think of when I watch this episode of Lois and Clark, The Human Bomb. the episode where the guy tries to hold Superman to ransom in order to control him, even just for a moment. Like that guy is a fantastic villain of the week in the George Reeves show, and it's a similar kind of setup here that they just want to trap Superman and have him as a trophy, you know. So yeah.
Yeah, Bet a Million Butler from the Human Bomb episode. That guy was intense. Okay, so my next pick, and well, I don't know. I feel like if you guys are game, maybe we can add a sixth round, because I feel like we can get a half a dozen here. So my second to last pick. All right, you guys know, the audience knows, like I'm not a big fan of the magical side of things generally, and especially in the realm of Superman. However, if I'm putting myself in the position of building a revenge squad that would be effective against Superman, and I want to make sure I have all my bases covered, I need a magical agent here. And I'm going with Baron Sunday.
Yeah.
From the season 3 episode Never on Sunday, played by Cress Williams, future Black Lightning. This was one I had like next to no memory of going into this rewatch. I had seen it, but I really didn't remember it. And I thought it was cool, even not loving the magical component so much, but I thought he was an interesting character. He's this ability to like conjure fears in people that then have a physical effect on them. And I thought what was particularly interesting, you know, throughout the episode, he's working this magic on Clark, who's able to resist it more so than the humans who were targeted. But he keeps having what looks like a coffin closing over him. But then at the end of the episode, he realizes it's this earliest memory of the spaceship lid closing as he was being sent to Earth. So it was a really nice payoff. But the other thing that I liked about this was I've complained about how as the show went on, we got less and less references to Clark's earlier travels. You know, at the beginning of the show, he's so worldly, and he's talking about, like you were saying, Rob, the Nigerian princess who taught him how to ballroom dance and all this stuff. And he's flying to China for takeout food and all this stuff. And we lose a lot of that. But here you have a reference to this early in his career article that he wrote. And, you know, it turns out that the government agents who were his sources were misleading him, and they had railroaded this Baron Sunday character. And now he's back and he's taking his revenge. So obviously we don't condone how far he goes in terms of killing these people that he's targeted. But there is a compelling and reasonable understanding motivation behind why he's doing what he's doing. So that motivation, the magical side, which Superman we know is particularly vulnerable to, and then just in terms of that episode itself, that moment of the ship closing, I thought was pretty powerful. So that's going to be my magical pick for round 5.
I always forget how good that episode actually is. It is a really good one. And Cress Williams, man, that guy's great. He's another 902 Beverly Hills 90210 alumni, as the actor who plays Clark and Superman in this also was. They were both on that show at different points. And then obviously Black Lightning. I mean, he's great on that show as well. But why I'm so glad you brought him up is I was trying to figure out a way to reference this, because it's one of my favorite things about Lois and Clark. People don't give Lois and Clark enough credit for how many elements from the comics that are actually in that show. Like, a lot of people think Gretchen Kelly from season 2 is just a villain of the week from Lois and Clark. That's a huge character from post-crisis comics. And like, there's loads of examples, like Suicide Slum is mentioned, Hobbs Bay, all these things from the comics, New Troy, all these elements. Baron Sunday, by the way, is a character from the comics. I didn't even know that until recently. Like, he's a villain from the comics, so that they obviously carried him over as well. So that's really, really cool.
I don't think I even knew that. What? What?
And
was
he's
like
a villain
this era?
from post-crisis comics. I looked it up, and that he's like on the cover of an issue, and he looks the same. I'm pretty sure his shtick is very similar. So yeah, he is from the comics, believe it or not.
Right on. Yeah, I mean there are a ton of pulls. I mean, we even get Bibbo in an episode when Lois thinks she's gone to Detroit.
I love nod like that.
Yeah, I just wanted more. I mean, I feel like we could have seen Bibbo.
Yeah.
You know, Bibbo could have been the guardian angel who married them instead of Mike. I'm just saying.
And you mentioned the villainous optometrist earlier on. What's his name?
Oh, Light, right?
Dr. Light. He's a character from the comics.
It's true.
It counts.
It counts. All right.
It's refreshing to see them dive into the comics on a show that you probably on the surface wouldn't think would do that as much.
Absolutely. All right. Well, this is interesting. In terms of how we're shaking, we all have magical representation now. All right. So, Chris, to close out round 5 here, who's your next pick?
All right, I'm gonna go more of the henchman style addition to my squad, but who could also step into a leadership role if needed. And I'm going to select Nigel St. John.
Oh,
Starts out as, kind of like a henchman for Lex Luthor and doing, all sorts of things. He's in the know. He's in the planning on like the tests of Superman early on and all of the certain things. And then when Lex is not there, he moves himself into a position with Inner Gang and holds his own.
And betrays Lex, and then is betrayed himself by Mazik at the end of season 2. So he's quite. I guess he gets what's coming to him in the end. But yeah, I feel like as far as Lex's underlings go, I think he would be my favorite. What about you, Rob?
Oh, he's a great choice. It actually never even occurred to me that, well, of course he is a villain. Like he belongs on this. Zach Moore has made the point a good few times that he's like an evil Alfred. And if you want to point to a character who would instantly carry over into the Superman comics if they so chose, Nigel's a great choice. Like he's a really, really cool character. And it's great that he pops up at least one more time without Lex. At the end of season 2 there, they do really cool stuff with him. So yeah, no, rock solid choice there. Shed a bit of love for Asabi though as well, who I also think is a pretty cool character. I don't have him on my list, so I'll just mention really briefly. They did some kind of cool stuff with him as well. Maybe a touch problematic, the whole sort of body swap mysticism stuff there. But that was the basis for a pretty cool episode near the end of season 4 there as well, where Superman swaps bodies with Jay Allen from the Flash TV show.
Oh, that's right. When I think of that episode, I always think of Stacey Keenan from Step by Step and a bunch of other stuff as the daughter. But yeah, I said this to Zach when we did our Lex episode, because it's like when you're watching Lex's final arc in season 3, and then the final step in his plan is to transfer his mind and Lois's mind into these cloned bodies, and Asabi is going to facilitate this. And in the season 3 episode, I'm saying to myself, well, can Asabi really do this? I feel like this might not go well. But then you get to that season 4 episode, and it's like, no, he actually can perform this body swap. So yeah, if we wanted to go more on the kind of mystical magical side, yeah, but I think in terms of strategy and everything you laid out, Chris, I think Nigel's a great pick, and honestly, a good, in thinking about team dynamics here in these revenge squads, you can't have all alphas, right? We've got to have we've got to have somebody who can kind of fall in line. So all right, that's cool, man. I like that one. All right, so that's volume 5. So in terms of where we are so far, before we head into our final round here, Rob, you have Lenny Stoke, Diana Stride, Jason Xavier, Patrick Sullivan, and the Lakes. I have Lord Noor, Jason Trask, Mr. Smith, a.k.a. Lex Luthor Jr., Mindy Church, and Baron Sunday. Church and Sunday. I didn't put that together. And Chris has Tempus, Mixes Pitalik, Bob and Carol, Al Capone, and Nigel St. John. All right, so snaking around here, Chris, lead us into round 6 with your final draft pick.
All right, we're getting into tough territory here, trying to find some gems here. I know
this is more than I asked you to prepare, so fairness.
No, for the end, I was between a couple, but I think I am going to also take consideration for, I want to round out my squad with more on the female side, and I was thinking Vixen, but I think I'm going to circle back and go with Barbara Trevino from the earlier seasons, and that whole Mr. Makeup storyline. And I have a vivid image in my head when Barbara is in she's in the disguise at the Daily Planet, and she's in the closet, and then just like very smoothly pulls that gun out on Lois. And I know she gets foiled by Jimmy, and it's a whole kind of campy ending to that the storyline for her. But like I guess the twist that she's there and she's the scary one. They didn't know she was there, and Lois had been scared the whole episode of her because of the threats. And this is a plot that had been in the making for like years. Like, hadn't this been going on for like decades? The things that had gone on with her and the other characters of the episode, that the names are eluding me. But I remember that episode vividly, and I remember her being kind of a scary thing to, she, even when Lois is at her most, hiding and retreated and scared, like she gets there and gets a drop on her a little bit. So I'm going to add her to my team. I think she could be a powerful ally for the others that I have.
That episode, man, Witness. That's probably in my top episodes. That's probably like number 5 or number 6. I really really like that one. And talking about the different eras of the show, that one is very heavily like season 1, much more kind of a serious sort of a romantic, kind of mystery journalism type show where Superman's barely in that episode at all, and the episode is all the better for it. And it gives a great look at what I think Deborah Joy Levine, the original showrunner, what she probably wanted the series to be more than what it eventually became. And it has that wonderful scene, man. There's a scene where the Mr. Makeup is dressed up as the super of Lois's building, and he comes into her apartment and he attacks her, and she's totally taken off guard, and she's using her karate chops and her karate kicks because Lois in the show is really good at karate for some reason. But he gets the better of her and he chokes her, and Clark arrives just in time, and he gives her basically the kiss of life, like a super kiss. And they play the love theme, the da, 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 da. And she is revived. And then there's this wonderful moment where Clark is about to run out after the guy and apprehend him, and she's like, "No, stay with me." And it's just a really tender, romantic moment. And yeah, no, I really, really like that episode. I'm really glad we got to talk about that episode.
Yeah, that's a standout one. And this actually came up in our supporting cast discussion last week as well. Is you even get a moment of humanity from Kat at the end of that episode. Yeah. That's where she's talking to Lois about, like, were you really scared? And, kind of just wanted to see beyond that, tough exterior of Lois. And, you see kind of what that means to Kat and for her as well. So yeah, that's a standout episode. That's a great pick.
And I do want to give one honorable mention that I don't think I could add as a villain, but I thoroughly enjoyed that Lois and Clark went this way, because I'm pretty sure none of you are going to pick it. But the episode very early on, Requiem for a Superhero, just the notion of like superpowered boxers that want to fight Superman and can do that thing. And I know that's somewhat that's a comic storyline that gets explored a few times, but the notion that you have Superman would fight in this boxing ring, and they could be enhanced to do that. I think that would be a formidable option for it. I don't think that makes a good revenge squad here. But if you guys all own it, I'm pretty confident that's not where you guys are going.
No, I didn't have the cybernetic boxers on the list, but it was cool. And like, that's kind of an example of what I was saying before with Lex, where, you have him pulling the strings here. You also have Lois's father, Sam Lane, involved in this as well. So it's like that kind of added some layers there.
The first Sam Lane.
Yeah, the first Sam Lane.
Going back to something I was saying earlier on, Chris, about, how this was an extension and an evolution of the George Reeves show. One of the things that really frustrates me in the George Reeves show is just for the sake of variety, couldn't we have someone that is like a physical match for Superman that he can just give a little punch to every once in a while? Couldn't we just have that? And Lois and Clark, early on, they were like, cyborg boxers, done. We can have a fist fight, and it's really, really enjoyable for that reason. So
yeah, or like you were saying before when we were talking about Trask, it's like, yeah, their take on kryptonite is not consistent from season 1 to the rest of the series. And even in season 1, this idea of like, he's okay, he's not dying, but like he doesn't have his powers for an extended period of time, doesn't quite line up. But yeah, then you get that awesome fist fight in the water. It's like, well, I'll take it. That's fine. Clark and his denim fight. It's great. It's great.
Yeah.
Oh man, this is tough. For my last pick here, I'm really thinking out loud. So bear with me. But like, there are a few. I guess maybe this is like a little bit of an honorable mention sort of thing. Like I toyed with Tez, the alien assassin from the New Krypton arc. But I feel like I already have Lord Nor. I wanted to kind of broaden it out a little bit, but he was a contender really close to Anonymous, played by Dave Coulier in the Chip Off the Old Clark episode, because I like the idea of the Master of Disguise. And I would 1000% forgot that it was Dave Coulier when that makeup finally came off. So like he's a contender. There's a little part of me that's like, we need a follower, someone who's really going to get in line. And I'm thinking a Chip from the Nazi episode, but from the ideology alone, I won't touch that character. But the kind of, again, that falling in line sort of aspect. Then I'm thinking of like a wild card. Like, I don't know, like Willie from the Fly Hard episode, the security guard at the planet who ends up pulling the strings. Like, that was a cool moment. So those are some contenders, but I do feel like if I'm looking at my list, to round it out, I think I need more of a science component. I think that's kind of what my list is missing here. And then we do have a few contenders on that front, but I think I'm going Mr. Gadget. I think I'm going Mr. Gadget from the Jerry White episode.
Yeah.
I had thought you were going to go with the Veils because of the Metallo tie, but that's a good pick.
Yeah, the Veils were a contender as well, but no, I don't know. I think I'm going Mr. Gadget for the scientific side of things, and there's also, I mean, I know this is really more of a Jerry White thing, but the red kryptonite connection as well there, which, you know, again, in terms of things that are pulled in from the comics, you know, we didn't get the rainbow of different kryptonite colors, but we did get red kryptonite 3 times, and they had it affect Superman differently each time. We didn't have mutating heads and all of that stuff, but he was apathetic. Then his powers got transferred to Lois. Then here in this episode, and I'm blanking on the title of the episode off the top of my head, but the one with Jerry White. But here, you know, you got Superman's powers are all out of whack. So maybe I'm giving Mr. Gadget himself a little bit too much credit, but I feel like the scientific side of things plus the red kryptonite connection, I feel like he rounds out my crew. So I'm going Mr. Gadget.
Nice. Talking about reverence to the comics, Lois and Clark is the only Superman TV show, if I'm not mistaken, where red kryptonite does what it does in the comics, in that it's unpredictable and it has a different effect every time. In every other Superman TV show, it either makes him evil or apathetic, or every other one is just evil or apathetic, isn't it?
Did we get red kryptonite in Superman and Lois?
Not Superman and Lois,
No.
but in Supergirl, I think it pops up and it has that effect,
yeah.
doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. My Supergirl TV series memory is a little bit shaky. Obviously, we get it a ton on Smallville, and there, like, it removes his inhibitions, and typically that manifests in horniness. But yeah, as we get deeper into the series, it shifts a little bit. But yeah, it is still generally consistent in terms of, like, it does that one thing, and it's more there. It's more like, well, what he's holding back changes over the course of the series. So when the inhibitions are gone, like, the behavior changes, but still the kryptonite is doing the same thing. So no, I really do like, maybe Jerry White should have been my pick. No, I'll stick with Mr. Gadget. I'll give him the credit. All right, cool. All right. For your last pick and the last pick of this game, Rob, what is your last draft pick?
Get ready for the deepest cut of them all, fellas. So I was trying to think of someone who was a truly insane schemer, who had, like, we've spoken about people who are influential public figures, and I mentioned Diana Stride, who has that but is also able to infiltrate, and we've talked about Mindy Church, we've talked about all these people. I wanted to pick someone who was truly, truly crazy, but who was able to bring, like, you know, vast numbers of people behind his cause and get them to believe what he's selling, basically. And I wanted to pick someone who was very effective in their scheme and almost achieved it. This is a guy who almost destroyed the world. Right? That's more than Lord Nor did. That's more than Lex Luthor did. That's more than Tempus did. I'm talking about Larry Smiley from season 3, Just Say Noah, the Noah's Ark guy. He nearly destroyed the world.
That's a good pick. That's a good pick.
I love it. I actually considered that myself. I that episode stands out too. And that was a very memorable Lois and Clark episode.
For anyone who doesn't remember, he has this weather machine. He's a cult leader, right? So he has this self-help seminar thing that Lois and Clark go to
for couples,
and for couples, yeah. And they initially go pretending to be a couple, but as it turns out that they actually are having problems in the relationship that manage to get solved over the course of the episode. But he's recruiting these couples to be part of this cult that is going to be like Noah's Ark. They're all going to get on the Ark, and he's going to use this weather machine that he has taken from one of the cult leaders one of the cult members who is a wealthy industrialist, I guess. And it's a weather machine that is able to create this insane storm that will end all life on Earth. And he very nearly succeeds. And Superman has to save the day and stop the weather machine. But, like, every time I watch the episode, I'm like, wow, this guy's hitting harder than, like, any other villain on this show.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the potential scale of destruction and how close it actually came to happening. And no, Rod, that's a good one. And also, like you said, the way he's able to get these people to follow him. And it's not like when Tempus comes back in season 4, he's literally brainwashing people. John Doe is a darn nice guy. But this is really just manipulating people like a cult leader. So there's that component as well. Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know where you were going with this last pick. For a second, I'm like, is he going Dr. Dieter from the Amnesia arc?
Oh, no.
That's a different category of evil.
Yeah.
All right, so to recap. Rob's Superman Revenge Squad: Lenny Stoke, Diana Stride, Jason Xavier, Patrick Sullivan, The Lakes, and Larry Smiley. My squad is Lord Noor, Jason Trask, Mr. Smith, aka Lex Jr., Mindy Church, Baron Sunday, and Mr. Gadget. And Chris's squad is Tempus, Mixie Spitalik, Bob and Carol, Al Capone, Nigel, and Barbara Trevino. So I'm going to put together a graphic. I'm going to post this up across our social media channels, and people can vote as to which squad they think is best. I don't know. In the end, I feel like we all kind of had similar strategies, right? In terms of kind of trying to cover as many bases as possible, right? So that was kind of interesting in terms of how that shook out. Are there any villains none of us picked that you're surprised we left on the table?
I was surprised the prankster didn't get taken by anybody.
Yeah, no prankster. Either Toyman. We left all three of them on the table.
I think none of us said Bill Church or Bill Church Jr. I felt like they'd be pretty likely choices. Bruce Campbell is great, and Peter Boyle is great the first time he shows up. I'm less enamored by him in the subsequent appearances, but they're both good villains, I think, and Intergang in general. I guess I'm glad Mindy Church was picked for that reason.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Prankster generally is not a character who has resonated with me a ton. I know, if I'm not mistaken, I think Dan Slott is planning to do work with him in the Superman Unlimited title in the comics currently. So I'll be curious. That might change my perspective on the prankster. I feel like here with Bronson Pinchot, I just feel like in the second appearance, I guess he was a little more out there, but I just feel like he was relatively restrained for that character and that actor. I felt like they really could have pushed that more. Like I don't feel like he popped as well as he could have. And I didn't feel like either Toyman really did much for me. How do you guys feel?
The one was redeemed at the end, so I don't know much of a revenge.
Yeah, I think that Season's Greetings is a solid enough episode, and I like that guy Sherman Hemsley in the role. But yeah, it's fairly one and done. It's like there's not really a lot you could do with him after that episode. He gets married to Mrs. Well, what's her name? It's not Mrs. Cox. It's
Mrs. Cox is a different one.
Yeah,
Mrs. Cox is a different one. Yeah, but
Miss Duffy.
It's Miss Duffy. Yeah, he gets in a relationship with her at the end of the episode. So yeah, he's kind of one and done.
Yeah, and then the other Toyman, Cripsley, in the penultimate episode of the series, he was okay, but I felt like he had too many motivations because there was the bad childhood, but then also he didn't get credit for an invention. I feel like there's too much going on here. I feel like we need to zero in on one thing in particular. But I briefly toyed with him in lieu of Mr. Gadget, like as to represent that side of things, but obviously I didn't go that way. So yeah, Prankster and the two Toyman iterations, I guess. I'm not floored that we didn't use them. And Metallo, I think we accounted for why we didn't. He was just disposed of like way too easily. If he could just melt that fast, I don't think we get very far. No one took Vatman, the clone of Superman. Is it that we don't really consider him a villain? Is it that?
Yeah, he's kind of bizarro, and he gets redeemed at the end, and he dies at the. Yeah, I mean. And it's always like you want there to be a bit more variety than just an evil version of the hero, you know? That's typically why I wouldn't pick him.
I'd considered it, but I didn't end up going with Vixen. There's another notable.
Yeah, I feel like maybe if she hadn't turned out to be an android, maybe she would have earned a spot. You know, and she too, it's hard to ignore the defeat. Like she too is taken out so easily. Like he just deflects the blast and that's it. Right. So, but the super speed actually would have been like, that's a new dynamic, you know, that we don't have represented elsewhere. But yeah. All right.
I actually, two we didn't mention. One is a very solid one that could have been on the list. Gretchen Kelly, the show's version of Gretchen Kelly, because her whole thing is like figuring out how to siphon Superman's powers and transfer them to other people. That's a pretty useful skill to have if you're on a villainous team like this. And then obviously the result of that being Resplendent Man, who almost ended up on my list, but then I was kind of like, he's not really a villain. He's kind of just an anti-hero, but he's great, you know. Any appearance by Resplendent Man would be welcome for me.
Similarly, you can kind of say the same thing like notable villain like the Smart Kids, but they're not really at the end. They're not smart anymore. Like, and but the way they were able to mastermind their whole plot from the beginning before they lost their juice.
Yeah, that was good. And discovered Clark's identity, and he had to come up with that whole ruse where he's a slob on the couch and he's squirting ketchup on himself and pretending he's bleeding. Yeah, that was good stuff. All right, guys, thank you so much. I had a feeling this would be a fun one. This was more fun than I even expected it to be. So thank you so much for being so game and playing. And I really hope people enjoy. And like, audience, share your squads, like put together your list of 6 villains and share them with us. I'd be really curious what people come up with. So what do you guys have going on? Rob, you want to let folks in on what's going on the All-Star Superfan front?
Yeah, we've been a little bit quiet of late, but hopefully by the time this goes out, we're going to have a couple of new episodes. We have an interview with Stephen Mooney all about The Rocketeer, and we're going to be doing a special episode on Jimmy Olsen to talk about the recent TV show announcement. And if you head to our Patreon, not only will you see our monthly Superboy rewatch show, but world exclusive, we have done a very special episode with Zach Moore, where we rank each of the Star Trek movies. So I know an awful lot of Superman fans who are also Star Trek fans, so definitely check that out there if you get a chance. It's a lot of fun.
Right. I know I've said this to you before on mic as well, but your approach to the Superboy rewatch of taking an episode from the beginning of the series and an episode from later in the series and talking about them together, when you told me that, I was kicking myself. I'm like, God damn it. I could have done that with my George Reeves rewatch podcast. I would have been done years ago. So I like that approach. And I feel like it makes a lot of sense given the arc of that series and how much it changes. And I'm sure it's particularly interesting to view them in tandem. So, so that's great. I hope people will check that out. And Chris, what about you? And always hold on to Star Wars.
Yeah, I'm bouncing around over there on the Always Hold On To network of podcasts. Some Smallville stuff coming up soon. And if you like this draft format, the Star Wars podcast that we do, Always Hold On To Star Wars, we do a yearly draft, and we've done a number of different categories each year. So you can go check those out if you're interested in applying this logic to Star Wars.
Right on. Yeah, I hope people will check that out. Yeah, this was fun. I mean, we've done plenty of top 10 countdowns on this podcast before, but this is the first time we've done a draft. I feel like I want to play around with this format some more because it's fun to make a little game out. It would have been fun to talk about these villains either way, but to make the game out of it, I think added something. So thank you guys so much. Thank you, audience. Next week, it is the grand finale to the Lois and Clark TV mixtapes. I will be joined by the 3 ladies who host Folks Forever, a new Lois and Clark rewatch podcast, and we are going to be counting down our top 10 episodes of the series. I suspect some of the episodes that came up in this discussion will also be represented there, but I'm really excited to finalize my list and then compare lists with the folks from Folks Forever. So make sure you come back for that. Until then, as always, it's about what you do. It's about action. This podcast is an affiliate of BCW Supplies. The next time you need to restock on comic book bags, boards, boxes, and more, be sure to use promo code FSP to save 10% on your order. That's FSP for Flat Squirrel Productions. It helps support the show too. Thank you. By popular demand, Digging for Kryptonite merch is now available at our TeePublic store. Visit the link in the show notes to get your DFK shirts, hats, mugs, and more. Support the show and receive exclusive content, including the spin-off podcast Beyond Metropolis, by becoming a member at patreon.com/Anthony Desiato. My sincere thanks to all patrons. Please subscribe, rate, and review today via your platform of choice and continue the conversation by joining us on social media. Flat Squirrel Podcast is also home to another exciting episode in the Adventures of Superman, now covering the color era of the classic George Reeves series. Subscribe today. Digging for Kryptonite is a Flat Squirrel production. Key art by Isaiah Simmons and theme music by Dan Pritchard.